Hey everybody, Casey Pratt at Channel 7 asked me for my take regarding the city's new problem because $182 million in grants that were to be used for Howard Terminal Ballpark project were rejected. My answer to his question as to how to solve the problem is something I've talked about for quite some time. It's not rocket science. It goes like this. First, establish the Howard Terminal Public Financing Authority, a nonprofit formed in corporate structure and then approved by the Oakland City Council. This would be done in accordance with California Enhanced Infrastructure Financing District legislation, and more pointedly, SB 293 Skinner. If you follow the law, even if you don't want to use SB 293 Skinner, you just go with SB 628 Beal, which is the father of all of these types of legislations, you still have to establish the Public Financing Authority. Then, you have to begin work on what is called the Infrastructure Financing Plan. That will spell out what tax increment financing will be used to build in detail. The good news is the city has much of that already figured out. It just simply has to essentially, and I'm being simplistic in my description, itemize that in the infrastructure financing plan. It can also take the work that the community group spent on for over a year and a half and incorporate that in the infrastructure financing plan. A number of people think that's supposed to be in the development agreement, and there you go. No, it's the infrastructure financing plan. Then, as we are writing the infrastructure financing plan, which will have to be approved by the new Howard Terminal Public Financing Authority, okay? We then figure out officially what the tax increment will look like, which means we establish the 55 acres of Howard Terminal land as the basis for the base year, and then we, for the Oakland Athletics, pick a target assessed value of new construction that must be built to kick off the new redevelopment area. $2 billion. The ballpark will take up roughly 600 to 700 million. Ideally, we'd like for it to be $1 billion. And then we need to throw in a combination of projects that get us to $2 billion. That points us to what John Fisher and his compadres want to build. I believe John Fisher needs a development partner to do that. I don't believe he has the financing to do it by himself. But the point is to target construction that is to be built at the base year. That will then get us to, assuming a 4% rate of growth of assessed value over a 45-year period, $1.6 billion in tax increment financing revenue, of which we would use 50% of that. And of that 50%, which would be, of course, 800 million, we then draw out the infrastructure money required. Now, here's the kicker. Here's the good news. 4% is an extremely conservative growth rate estimate. The real growth rate estimates are between 6% and 9% per annum. So we're establishing what I call a conic of revenue generation and use. All right. Why do I call it a conic? Because it increases annually over time, and it looks like, well, a type of cone or triangle. That's why. But then we establish the Howard Terminal Public Financing Authority now, and we establish the land, the boundaries and such now, and we establish the right to collect property taxes from that area now. So what we'll be getting are what's called unsecured property, and then eventually assessed value from the buildings that are constructed there, okay? And then we do pay-go. But what I want to do is take it a step further to accelerate the revenue gathering process. Normally, the taxing agencies, the city, the county, BART, AC Transit, EB Mud, get the base year of assessed value, right? I want to negotiate with them and get a rider from the legislature so that we can get that base money. Why? Because it will take us from an estimated $800 million, $800,000 in first year revenue to $20 million. It's a big difference. From that $20 million base, we can then begin to consider floating a truly larger bond issue for the needs of the infrastructure, Howard Terminal infrastructure. So for those of you who would say, well, what kind of bond issues that call for? Is limited obligation? The bottom line isn't really so much the type of bond, but the fact that if you stick to the law, it's the Howard Terminal Public Financing Authority that's stuck with the bill and not the city, okay? Not the city. And the entire project can be designed in such a way that in the, I believe, unlikely event that the bonds would go to default, then the underwriters would take over the entire project, the buildings that we're talking about, okay? So the basic problem, Casey, is that you have people, this has been so politically driven and politically led, who don't want to think in terms of a process of making money. They want to basically try to succeed the money-making aspect of the project to themselves. In other words, I can get the grant, I can do this. I was wrong-headed, all right? And yet, they just marched along and kept doing it, didn't pay attention to tax increment financing, kept coming up with incorrect estimates and keeping them secret, which when a person says they're keeping public tax increment financing figures secret, I think they really just don't know what they're doing. You don't keep those secret. And really, technically, that's against the law. So there's the first part of my answer, Casey. Subscribe to Zenny62 and bookmark OaklandNewsNowBlog.com. Thanks.